Alright guys, I'm going to make a video here of the removal of the front diff on a 2014 CF Moto 800 zforce EX. This is the original front diff, and I actually cracked it. As you can see right here and all up into here and all the way down, and as we get into it you'll see more of where it actually cracked and exactly what happened. But essentially you do have to remove all the plastics from the back here, and then this tunnel here to actually disconnect the front drive shaft. I found it was easier to disconnect the bolts on the this deal here from inside the cab. I did one actually reaching my hand up into there, and then let's see if I can get a better shot of that. Yeah, it's actually right down in there. And then once I got all those plastics apart, I found that it was a lot easier to go the other way. So essentially you remove this tunnel and you can get to the front drive shaft. There is a carrier bearing deal that splits the shaft that you can take out, and then the drive shaft is just a standard slip yoke like just about every vehicle has on their drive shaft, and it slips out and you're able to take it out. There is 3 bolts that hold it together, and then you actually have your mechanism right here that engages the four-wheel drive and four-wheel drive lock. It's just a similar to like a window motor or window regulator. It's just got splines on it, and it actually drives this guy right here. So this guy's in this position here, this is two-wheel drive. Right about there is four-wheel drive, and then all the way down, probably won't get it to lock because it's been taken apart and it's damaged, but essentially it slides all the way down and that's locked, and I'll go into detail on how that works. But this video is just pretty much to show you how the inner workings work, and how the parts can be removed and replaced as needed, and that's about it. So we'll get started. Let me set the camera up here. There we go. So once you remove all the bolts that split the case, it's got these pry points, one right here, and then one right there. And you essentially drive a chisel or a wedge or a screwdriver and with a dead blow hammer or a brass hammer, and just split it. Keep in mind it's just aluminum, and as you can see how it cracked there. And internally it's not the strongest aluminum. It does have a rubber seal that goes all the way around instead of using a gasket, which I thought was actually pretty nice, because they could have just cheaped out and threw a quart gasket on it or a paper gasket and called it a day, but instead they actually machined out a channel to put an O-ring in. So that's kind of nice. So once you get that out, the whole deal comes out as an assembly, and the bearings are off of this one. Now these are the 2 bearings that go on there. This one goes here, and then this one goes here. Now I've already taken those off. They are pressed on there, and they are a pain in the ass to get off. This diff has been destroyed, so essentially whenever I took it apart, the only reason why I took it apart was just to see what happened. I didn't really care about if I had damaged anything when I took it apart. I just wanted to investigate. So just so you know, if you ever do want to take them apart, I've found when these are on, you can take pieces of angle iron and get underneath them, get another piece here, and support this angle iron, either in a vise or however, and I found that that's the best way to drive these off without damaging them. Make sure you do get around the actual inner lip and not just the outer, because you'll damage those. But a lot of times, to me, as cheap as bearings are, whenever you remove them, damn near most of the time you replace them, because bearings are cheap. So once those are off, you have the whole unit here, and essentially you can see a little bit better here. This is actually how the four-wheel drive works. So whenever it's in four-wheel drive, it's only about that far engaged to where these inner splines are connected onto here, which are running the spider gears. Now whenever it's fully engaged, it's that far out, that's in lock position. These outer splines here connect into this deal here, so they're connected here and then also on the cage, and then that thus gives it the 100% true locker. It no longer is relying on the spider gears, it's relying on the cage and the gears turning it, which is throwing bolt power to both tires. So that's that. This here was another failure point on mine from whenever it actually the spider gears blew apart. There was pieces that were left in here, and I needed to get out of the creek and back up to the trailer, so I had to drive it. In an ideal condition, I wouldn't have drove it, and I possibly could have rebuilt it, but like I said, I had to drive it, so it is what it is. But this guy here, there's an actual bearing in here, and you can press that out as well, or use like a two-jaw puller to pull that out. But there is a nut that goes on here that I've already taken off, and yesterday I cleaned the workbench, and I think I threw it out. But anyways, it's just there's a rubber washer and a nut. You take that off, and this deal slides off. There's actually a seal on here, and then there is a locking retainer nut in here that similar to if you've ever done worked on a four-wheel drive locking hub, where it's a nut that has a special socket that fits into there. I didn't have that, so essentially I just used a chisel and chiseled it out. And once you get it started, it's fine machine thread. So once you get it loosened, you can run it out by hand. And there's also a bearing that goes down in there. And once that's out, this guy just slides right out, and you can see the bearing in there just a little bit better. But mine was damaged, as you can see there. It's missing a tooth, and there's metal shavings all over the place. So once that's out, oh, and here's some more of the casing that cracked. But yeah, once all that's out, you have this here. This is the main deal here. This is where all the four-wheel drive happens. You have your spider gears. I don't know if you can see or not, but this one here is completely destroyed on mine. This one is missing two teeth, but this one here took the worst of the brunt of it. There is some type of clutch deal in here. I can only assume it's a clutch of some sort, because it's got some type of friction material on it. I'm not familiar with how it works. I can only assume it's for when it's in four-wheel drive and not lock, it's supposed to add some type of retention. But essentially, if you were going to replace this, you would first take off the bearings, of course, like I did. Like I said, use a piece of angle iron. Essentially, set it down, get you an impact. These were on very tight. I have this Milwaukee impact. I think it's rated for like 1,100 foot-pounds, and it took everything it had to take them off. And I've already taken them off before, so They're not, I didn't put them back on very tight. Once you get them all the way off, or all of the 6 nuts or bolts off, flip it around, and this deal here actually just slides out. I kind of thought it would be pressed and I would have to heat it up, but it was not, and it just slid out. It's kind of fighting me right now, but it does slide out. Alright, so that comes out as an assembly, and then you reveal the first gear here. And on mine, this, one second. Got the boy out there screaming and yelling. Anyways, on mine, this one wasn't too bad. I don't see any missing teeth or anything. This is that friction deal that I was telling you guys about. And there's also a spacer or a washer or a shim, and it actually cracked. As you can see, it sits down in there like that, and then this deal goes in like this, and then that's where that sits in. So once you got that taken apart, you have this guy. Now if you wanted to rebuild this or replace those, you need to drive this pin out to release these spider gears. There is a roll pin right here that once you drive that out, this shaft will slide completely out. And this is another thing that I noticed. Like they did this here, and then they also did it. And what I'm referring to, what they did is there's these grooves in this shaft, and I can only assume that these grooves are for getting oil in behind these gears. And I was actually telling this to a buddy of mine. You know, those are things right there that they have done that, or CF Moto did, that they didn't have to do. That I could see them cutting corners and say, you know, we're not going to put them grooves in there because it might cost us an extra $3 or something, or whatever the case may be. But those grooves there, you know, with allowing oil to get behind those gears, that's impressive to see that. I mean. I've never seen that even on an automotive diff before. Not to say that they're not designed differently, but I mean, it just goes to show you that, you know, they essentially they didn't cut any corners. And you know, somebody might say, well, why are you rebuilding it? You know, if it's so good. Well, if I would have made a video of what I did, I don't think there would be any doubt on why I had to rebuild it or replace it, because yeah, it was negligence on my part. I shouldn't have done that, but it is what it is. So anyways, we'd set this guy up or put it in a vise. It's not very hard to pound it out. Go ahead and set it up. Sometimes your punch gets stuck in there, and you give it a little back, and it'll come right out. Now I dropped that pen on the floor. Oh well, we'll find it later. Once you do that, though, this rod here actually slides right out. Now, when I first took it out, it kind of gave me some trouble, but it eventually did come out. Yeah, I'm going to put it in the vise. Well, I kind of got it in a bind by driving it too far. There we go. So the first one comes out and it's got a copper shim or brass, one of the two. Kind of looks to be brass. As you can see, this one was totally destroyed. And then the rest of the rod slides out and it reveals another spider gear with another shim. And they're actually marked FL, and well, this one's missing because all the teeth are missing. But and then this gear here slides out as well, and it's marked as well as FL. So what is this one? I guess they're both marked FL. Wonder if that's just a stamping mark or something. I would have thought it would have been left hand, right hand, but maybe not. Alright, so once those are all out, that's pretty much it. There's not much else to it. There's just this guy, and then if you, in my case, like what I'm considering buying a new case, new case, and new bearings and new seals, and replacing the parts that were bad, because this diff, brand new, is 7 or 8 and some change, depending on where you get it from. I got really lucky and bought a used one from a guy who's parting out quite a few machines, or CF Moto zforces or whatever, and the diff and shipping, it was right at $100. And as you can see, mine was dirty and everything, and that's just how it was whenever I bought it. The one he sent me, I mean, it was just as shiny as this here. I mean, it looked brand new. It looked like it had never been in, you know, barely even used or broke in. And he shipped it to me. I went ahead and I took it apart. I just took the casing off just to look at it, just to make sure. I took this piece off just to see if there was anything in there, and I'm glad that I did, because when I took it apart, I revealed one of the C-clips that actually holds the axles in. It was stuck on the magnet of the drain plug, and if anyone who's ever seen one before, you know that they're about the size of a nickel, and there's no way that it would have ever came out when draining the diff. So eventually it would have got up inside one of these gears and wreaked havoc. And those clips are hardened steel. It's not, you know, a soft metal that, you know, the gear could possibly chew up. It's hard stuff. So yeah, it would have ruined it. So thankfully I took it all apart, cleaned it, blew it out with air, put it all back together, threw it in the side-by-side, and haven't had any issues with it, knock on wood. It's been great. It's actually quieter than this one was. When I got this machine, the front diff actually made a whining noise, and I don't know if it was due to maybe a bearing or something. I don't know, but it did have a noise to it, and a little bit of vibration too, which could have been U-joints or something, because once I did find out, or once I did take the diff out, I did check the U-joints, and I did have a bad one. I replaced it, and now there's no vibration or anything like that. But so yeah, that's pretty much it. And then if you wanted to replace these, you would just put everything back together in reverse order, and this whole assembly, whenever it is in, now this is something that I did not show you because I've already taken it apart, and like I said, I cleaned the shop the other day, and some of the shit got thrown away. But there is a shim pack that sets down inside of here. All down inside of here. There was 3 shims on mine, and I'd have to believe that every one of them is different. Maybe they use all 3 of the same size shims, I don't know. Or I would have to assume during assembly they set them in there, and then they tell, or they look and see if one needs another shim, whether it be a 1,000 out or 1,000 off or whatever. But there was 3 in mine. The new one that I got, or the used one that I got, when I took it apart, there was 4 in it. So yeah, I can only assume that it's done at the factory. So that's one thing though, just you want to definitely keep in mind if you rebuild it, use the same shims, especially if all you're doing is replacing the spider gears. Now if you're going to replace this guy here, you may have to order different shims because the tolerance or the difference may be on this machine part versus this one may be different. Because ideally what the whole idea of it is that when this is properly installed, these gears here need to line up with these gears perfectly and contact each other perfectly, and if they are not, they will wear themselves out and essentially destroy themselves. I know on multiple occasions I went to high school with a guy who had to pay for 3 different rebuilds of his he built a real nice truck, mud truck, and put a locker in it, and the guy who put the locker in it did not know what he was doing, and he rebuilt that rear end 3 different times. The first time he had ever had it out, he was doing a burnout and blew it up. First time. Chunks went flying all over the road. So he took it back to the guy. The guy was a decent guy, and he wound up buying the new axle and everything and replaced it and did it all over again. And he didn't drive it for 1,000 miles, and it did the same thing. Well, come to find out, the guy really wasn't. He knew how to put the parts together, but he didn't necessarily know how to set the tolerances with the shims and make sure the teeth line up with the patterns. And you have to use a special tool to see what the tolerances are and the in play, whether it's too loose or too tight. And they make a special paint that you can paint onto here. It's almost like a colored grease, and you can paint on 4 or 5 teeth. Put it in there, run it a little bit by hand, take it all back apart, and it will reveal exactly where that tooth is touching. And you want it to be right in the center. You don't want it to favor the inner or the outer of it. It wants to be right in the center for the best operation or longevity of the deal or whatever. But that's about it. Like I said, I figured I'd make this video show. Help some people out if they ever have to rebuild one, or if they have a situation like mine where just a spider gear let go, and you can buy these off of Alpha Sports and take it apart and rebuild it, and this probably only costs you 10-15 bucks worth versus paying for a whole new diff just because you think it's broke. Typically stuff like this can be rebuilt. It's just a matter of time and just doing it. So, yep. All right.